Hello everyone, thank you for coming. I apologize for the lateness of this project. I have been sick and had dealing with car problems this past week, and it's just been really rough, so I really do apologize. Um, from the first slide, you can see that we are talking about libraries and latchkey children. Latchkey children, that's an old-fashioned term for basically the kids are being left alone or just left unsupervised or unattended at a library for various reasons. It could be that the parents just want the kids out of the house for a little bit, so they think that to drop them off at the library. Maybe school is out and mom is just would like the house back to herself for a little bit. Or maybe it is both parents work and they don't feel safe leaving the child at home alone, so they think that the library would be a great place to leave them while they're both at work. So just some of the issues that come up with leaving your kids unattended at home. So next slide. So the organization that we're looking at is the Madison Library District. The library is in Rexburg, Idaho. If you haven't heard of it, that's okay. It's a small town. It's roughly 28,000, and so about half of that population attends. It includes students attending the college in town, or they are workers working in the town, are working at the college, or something to that effect, or just they're related to the college somehow. And then 14,000 people are the local people in the area that don't have anything to do with the college. They just like living in Rexburg. So the issue that we're really looking at on the next slide is the ethical problems of leaving your kids alone at the library. These latchkey children, is it okay to really leave your kid at the library? Are there issues to consider? And so we're going to talk about that and a little bit about the library policy, which is children under the age of 10 have to be attended by someone who is 14 or older. And how is that, if that part is ethical? So I interviewed the library director, and we talked about some really interesting things. Parents that leave their kids at the library because they think it's a safe place, these are actually come from like multiple problems coming together, and that lead to parents having this kind of false sense of security. Parents who wouldn't feel safe leaving their kids alone in a mall for about half an hour feel perfectly safe leaving their kids alone in a library for hours on end, because they assume that, hey, it's the library, it's got to be a safe place, right? So they have this false insecurity, and they don't realize a couple of things. The library director pointed out that one of the issues with it being a public library is that it is open to the public. It is a public building. They cannot control who comes and goes to the library. And so they've had problems with people shooting up drugs in bathrooms, or kind of being disorderly in the library, or the library director talked about how there was one time where they had an orgy that got started in a family bathroom, and they had to stop that. So there's all these issues that go on to the library that you probably don't want your kids exposed to, but they can happen, and they do arise. And how these parents, they think that the library is a safe place, and they think it's a good thing, and nothing bad ever happens there, but things do happen in a library, and that's kind of an issue. The other thing that kind of feeds into this false sense of security is librarians are busy. Or, I mean, not librarians are busy, but that librarians will keep an eye on your kid. And, when you think of a librarian, you think of the sweet older lady who's sitting there stamping books, and there's a kid, and you go and talk to them and help them, kind of like that image of the library in Matilda, how Matilda could go there and just check out books and be there forever. But that's not the case. The library director talked about how these librarians, they have their own jobs, they have their stuff that they need to be doing, and they can't afford to spend time checking on every kid and checking on all the other things and making sure that everything is perfectly safe. They are doing other stuff, and how parents assume that someone's looking out for their kids when they drop them off, but in reality, no one's looking out for the kids. No one's paying attention, and so that can lead to a series of problems. Um, no one's there, and so that can lead to a set of things that don't imagine that could happen. Um, and so this is real. So this kind of comes down to why that policy is in place and why this is going on. Parents leave their kids there, and the kids can get rowdy and they can do stuff, and how they can kind of get out of hand. And parents are in the library. They need a way of making sure that someone is there to take care of the kids and making sure that these kids are okay. Um, the librarian talked about one experience that I think is worth sharing, and that's how there was one family that kept leaving their kid at the library. They were visiting from out of town for a while, and they were leaving their kid at the library thinking everything was safe. And the issue that they had was the kid couldn't call home because he didn't have a cell phone. The library policy at the time was you couldn't make long distance calls, or patrons couldn't make long distance calls. The phone available to patrons wouldn't dial them, and so that led to issues that the kid couldn't call home. He couldn't use the library to call home. He didn't have a photo ID, like a school ID or anything. And he didn't have his own library card because he was from out of town. And so he couldn't use the library computers to play games or do anything there. And how these parents, they thought they were leaving their kid in a good environment, and in reality the library director said they had set their kid up to fail because the kid couldn't do anything, and the library couldn't do anything. There were policies that they had to follow, and these parents thought they were doing great, but they had just set their kid up to fail miserably. And so libraries aren't there to act in parental locus. They can't act in place of the parent like a school library can. They can't make decisions, but these people assume that they can, and so they leave their kids there. So that was kind of interesting. And so the library director talked to me about how the policy that they have there is there for a number of reasons. Number one, at 10 years old, they assume that a child is mature enough to be able to tell them, or if questioned, to be able to tell them their name, where they live, what their phone number is, enough to get the kid help, or to call somebody to get the kid help. There's enough there. If the kid is too young, they won't be able to answer those questions. And I've seen that firsthand. My 4-year-old can barely talk to strangers, let alone tell him his name and phone number. So there is something there to it. The other thing that we talked about was how the policy there is not only there for the library's sake, or for the kids' sake, it's there for the library's sake. If parents are just dropping off their kids, the library can't really call the police for help. The police told the library director and said, there's no law that they're breaking, there's nothing that they're doing, yet this is clearly a problem, but the police can't do anything. So they actually counseled with the library director and the board of directors, and they were able to put this policy in place. The policy is there so that way they can actually call the police and get help from the police, so that the police will take the kids home and not just use the library as a babysitting service. They can't not just leave the library ultimately responsible for the kids. And so I thought that was also something I wouldn't have expected. So, last slide, or the next slide, conclusion. So I actually found that the library's policy was fairly ethical. It wasn't discriminating against kids based on their age. It was a way of protecting the library from parents just dropping them off picking them up like a free daycare service, and it was also there to help the parent or help the library be able to get outside help from other places, so that way they can get the kids safely back to where they belong. So I thought that was really interesting. It's not a matter of age; it's a matter of maturity, and they needed something there. Um, so I thought that was perfectly okay. Next slide. I will say that I do have suggestions for the policy, and I think that is that the library should be doing more to make the public more aware of library policy. Uh, Summer's coming up, and parents are going to try to. Parents still have to work even if school is out, and if both parents work, they might think it's a great idea to drop the kids off at the library, and that's not the case. And so, the library needs to do so. They need to either put handouts um, in reserved books or books on hold, so that way they can go out and make the public aware of this is a policy that we have, that you can't just leave your kids at the library unattended, or they need to send out an email, or they need to do something, because this is an ongoing problem. The library director that I talked to said that she can't count the number of times that this has happened, and something's even happened in the past 3 weeks where they had a parent late and an unintended child, and that's just going to get worse as summer comes up, and so that the library really does need to work on making sure that they get everything taken care of. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed my project.